Hello everyone, welcome to Kitchen Table Creativity, where we sit at the kitchen table together, we watercolor paint beautiful images which are very simple watercolor projects. So today I have this basket full of beautiful, gorgeous, colorful Easter eggs. And again, this is a beginner project. It does not take any special skills, and so I encourage you just to take out whatever kind of supplies you have on hand and just work with this today. So you can see I'm going to look at my colors first. I have a dark brown here. I have a dark blue, a red, a yellow, and a green. And there's no specific colors you need to have with these, but you can notice I have the primary colors here. I have yellow, red, and blue. And I can get pretty much any color that I want just using those three paints, but I am going to add in the brown. I like to have a 5-color palette. So the green and the brown, I could mix them, but I'm going to have them in my palette today. And then I'm going to do a little bit of mixing. I'm going to get some orange and purple from the other colors. So real quick, my supply list. I have my paints, and I will put a link to the kit that I'm using. It's made in Japan. It's the kit I've been using for quite a while. I really love it. You don't have to start with that kit. You can start with any watercolors you have on hand. I have a piece of graphite paper here. I'm actually going to trace this. I love to trace because it just makes it a lot easier to center everything and have something to start with. And there's no shame in this. If you want to just trace this, the PDF is in the description. You can print it out. You can trace the basic shapes, and that will help you keep it centered and just give you a little bit of a head start without feeling like you have to know how to draw. That's the biggest objection I hear from people saying all the time, I can't paint because I can't draw, which is totally not true. I'm going to move my paints off here just to show you the paper. And I have the graphite paper. Put the dark face down waxless graphite paper. I'm going to put this image on here, and I'm going to use a stylus to trace it. I'm not going to take time to do that on this video, but I will show you that in another video if you want more detail. This is a piece of watercolor paper cold press. It's made by Strathmore. I'll put a link in the description again. I'm going to fold this where you can see the score down the middle. I'm going to fold it, and I'm going to make this into a card in case I want to give it to someone for Easter. I have my ceramic palette for mixing. I have my 2 round brushes that I like to use. They're very small. One is a size 2 and one is a size 5. Again, use whatever you have on hand. The small brush works good for this project because it is a small image and it's good for detail work. I'm also going to be using my spray water bottle to wet my paints before I start to paint. That's always a good thing to do. And then I have some permanent pens here that I'm going to use. I love the Micron permanent ink pens to do some outlining and detail work. And then I do have 2 white pens here, a rollerball and a Sharpie paint pen. And I'm going to use those for the detail work, especially on the eggs. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. I also have 3 jars of water over here. I like to use 3 jars. The first one to rinse my brush if it has a lot of paint on it, and then the second one to clean it even better, and the third one even better. And I like to keep a lot of water on hand just to make sure that I don't have to stop and go back to the sink and get more water. Okay, so as you can see, I have my image traced here, and I just have the basic shapes drawn in. I don't put all the detail work because that's easy to go back with a pen or with a small brush and add details, so you don't have to get every little detail. I also draw it kind of dark for the purpose of the video so you can see it, but it's better actually if you just make very light lines, not really heavy dark lines. That way the pencil lines won't even show once you get the paint on there. And also if you use waxless paper, graphite paper, it's erasable and it can be erased very easily. If you don't get the waxless kind, just beware that you might not be able to erase it. Probably depends on which one you get. Okay, so I'm going to start with the lightest color. And the thing about tracing it too is that it's so easy to get started. I don't want you to be held up by feeling like you have to, hand draw something perfectly. And a lot of times that's what stops people from even starting. So just go ahead and don't worry about it being perfect. Just get started. And so I'm going to start actually with the Easter eggs, this yellow. I've already put a little bit on my palette here. It's always good to start with the lightest colors and then work towards the darker colors. So I'm just going to go with a straight yellow, and I'm just going to start by filling in the 2 yellow eggs that are in the basket. I have my number 5 brush here, and even though the image is small, this brush works very well because the round tips have a very fine tip at the very end, and so you can always raise your brush up a little higher like this if you want to get into small details, and larger you can use it more towards the side like this. And I'm going to make this pretty much uniform. I'm not going to worry about adding shadows or anything like that on these 2 yellow eggs. And then what I'm going to do, because I have this yellow, and that's really the only yellow that's going to be in this picture, I'm going to go back. I'm going to rinse my brush. And I'm going to go into my red now, and I'm going to put some red here, and I'm going to, first of all, water this down a lot because I want it to look almost pink. One thing I forgot to mention, it is good to have just a scrap of watercolor paper on hand so you can test out your colors and see, like, especially when I'm watering something down, I want it to look very light. I'm going to test it to make sure that it looks light enough for me. So I'm going to make this one a very light color with this red. And then the reason why, and I want this to look almost pink, the reason why I'm going to go with the red first is because I'm going to mix now. I'm going to put just a little bit of red into this yellow, and I'm going to make an orange. And there's no right or wrong way, you know, you just find a color that you like. It doesn't have to be any specific orange. It can be a darker orange, it can be a lighter orange. I think I'm going to make mine a little bit darker. And again, I like to test it. Is it going to be enough contrast with that other pink? Okay, so I like this darker one a little better. So I'm going to go ahead now and paint the egg that's in the front here, this orange. And if you get too much water, all you have to do is kind of push it around first and make sure that it's not just that it's all in one place. And if you really feel like, oh my gosh, there's too much water, you can blot your pen on your paper towel. Always good to have some paper towel in hand or a rag to blot your brush. But the reason why a lot of times you get harsh edges on things is because there's too much water. So to avoid that, you can just keep lifting the water off, blot your brush, dry it, lift it, or you can even grab a dry brush if you want, lift it until it's really a feel. That's the thing about watercolor. It's like getting the right touch, the right feel for your paints. Okay, so now I'm going to go back and rinse my brush again. And I think now I am going to go in with the blue. This is a very dark blue. but it's also a nice bright color of blue. I really love this blue. This is called cerulean blue, but again, you can use any paints that you have on hand, and you can always add water, you can mix, but this is a nice, I think this is a nice kind of bright color of blue. I'm gonna make it a little bit more, yeah, a little bit more. I want it to almost look pastel. So I'm gonna go ahead and paint this one. And another thing that's good to do is to like put the darker in the middle and then just push it out towards the edges of whatever you're painting. Okay. And I might just add a little bit more. And then, now because I have the blue and I have the red, I'm going to mix those together and see if I can get a purple that I like. Purple can sometimes be a little more tricky. There's more blue purples, there's more red purples. And again, it's good to test them on your paper. And I think so just keep mixing together your blues and reds until you find a purple that you like. I think I like this one. And sometimes they might look a little muddy, they might turn out a little more brown, depending on the way that you mix the colors. So just keep playing around with it, working with it. Find a color that you like is the main thing. There's no right or wrong to this. And if you go over the lines a little bit, totally no worries. You can always lift it off like I just did a little bit, or you can just leave it. Because when we go back and we do the sketching part with the pens, you can easily fix anything that happens like that. Just trying to make this a little bit darker purple. Okay, and then the last one is green, and this is sap green, just a very ordinary green, which I'm going to use kind of just straight out of the palette. I'm not going to bother trying to mix it, just going to dilute it down a little bit. Okay. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to use this very dark brown, and I'm going to dilute this like way down with water, and I'm going to make it very, very light. because I want it to be a first layer, and I want the basket to look a little bit textured, so I'm not going to paint it a very dark brown to start with. I'm going to add a lot of water, make it very, very light, and I'm just going to paint the entire basket. And I've been using my number 5 brush this whole time. But again, use whatever you have on hand. There's no right or wrong way. So the goal here that I have whenever I'm teaching watercolor is I want people to see that, yes, they are creative. And when I talk about painting or any kind of creative process, drawing, scrapbooking, a lot of times people will say, oh, yes, I would love to be able to do those things, but I'm not creative. I'm not creative enough to do that. And I believe that every single person is creative, and that, yes, some people may be born with the talent that others don't have just naturally, but truthfully, I think what happens is when we're young, we have, maybe we love to draw, usually kids love to do art. But then somebody tells them that somehow their art isn't good or it's not good enough. Maybe it's one of their siblings. Maybe it's actually a teacher. That happened to me in 7th grade with my art teacher. She was always fixing my work. You know, like I would do something, and I specifically remember one time when we were doing sculpture with clay, and I chose a really difficult project, and she told me this is going to be difficult. It was a bust of Beethoven, because at the time I was also playing piano. And I didn't think it was turning out terrible, but one day she came over and we were working on this for like a week, and she just totally took over and fixed my painting, or my clay bust of Beethoven. And of course, when she fixed it, it looked way better. And so I just made up my mind, I think, at that moment that I just am not good enough at art. This is not something I can do. And you know what's really interesting is that all these years later, I still want to do clay, work with clay, and I haven't. I really have done very little work with clay. And I've always wanted to learn the potter's wheel. So if anyone is listening to this and they have any resources on that, I would love to see them, because it's something that I really want to learn how to do. And I know a lot of times there's classes like local, there's community centers and things where you live. And so I need to look into that, because it's something I really still want to do, is work with clay. I love all kinds of art. All right, so I've got a very basic kind of wash with this basket. It's a little bit textured here and there, a little bit darker, and that's kind of what I want. I'm going to go back over it with more dark once this is a little more dry, and we call that a wet on dry technique, where I'm going to go back with some darker colors, but I want to make sure this is dry because I don't want it to really interfere with what I already have going on here. So anyway, I wanted you to know that, yes, you are creative. Yes, it's something that you can learn. It's something you can work with. You don't have to be born with any special talents. You just really have to practice. And just like anything, the more you practice, the more you'll see results. So this is coming along. I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back and just grab some of the colors that I already had mixed, and like this purple, and I'm going to get it a little more, add a little more water to it. And I'm going to just add a little bit of detail to some of these eggs. More, not really detail, more like, I guess they would be shadows. Just to add a little more depth or interest because they look pretty flat, just all the same color. And this is kind of optional, you don't have to do this. Sometimes it's just fun to just try some different things. And I think I'll do the green. And you can see like this was quite a bit darker, so I'm going to take some water, just plain water, and blend this a little bit. You can always pull it back to the center, leave a few areas lighter. And since I used all my blue, I'm going to add a little more blue to my palette here. I used all my blue to make the purple. And like I always say, as you're working on stuff and it starts to dry, it might start to look a little bit different. And once it's dry, you can always go back and change it a little bit, touch it up a little bit here and there. Okay, I'm pretty happy with the way that looks. And now I am going to go back with the brown. And I'm just going to like start to add some detail to this basket. I am going to do a lot more with the pens, the black pen. But I kind of want to just give this a little bit textured look, a little bit more uneven, so that it kind of looks like a basket, not a smooth surface, like wicker. And, you know, when I make these videos, I really just, like, this is the first time I'm doing this. I just kind of go for it because I feel like if I sit and overthink things and I try to make it this way and that way and I'm worrying that it has to be perfect, I'll probably never get it done. And maybe I will just even stop altogether because it's too hard. That's why I'm trying to paint the way that I want you to paint. I want you to just go for it. You know, if it doesn't come out perfect, well, you can always redo it. But, you know, I think most of the time you'd be surprised that it comes out better than you think it's going to. So I'm just going to kind of leave that. It's a little bit messy, but I kind of like it. And okay, so I did add a little bit of darker brown around the edges of the basket, the outer edges. So now what I'm going to do is switch to a darker green. This is sap green dark, deep, and I like this to be a little bit darker than this green egg, and so I'm going to add some grass around into the basket, some green grass. So again, I'm going to probably just use this green straight out of the pan, and I'm also using my smaller brush. This is the number 2, and it has a very fine tip. So I'm just going to kind of freehand this grass. I'm not going to worry about it being perfect. And my paint is quite thick. I'm not watering it down hardly at all. And these are just kind of wispy little pieces of grass. So I really just wanted a little bit. I really don't want this to be like a huge amount of grass. So kind of just use your judgment. Less is usually more. Like right now, I'm just kind of looking at this going, okay, I could add some more, but I think I'm good with how it looks. I usually go for some kind of balance, like I have a little bit darker here, so probably add a little bit darker over here. Not much. And so just a very light touch with the brush, just light at the edge and a little bit darker towards the bottom. So I think I'm just going to leave it like that. I really don't want it to be any darker any more than that. And I like the way that. All right, so we are pretty much done with the painting. And I'm going to go now with the permanent black pen, the Micron 05. And I'm going to start to add highlights, especially to the basket. Now you're going to want to make sure that your paint is really super dry, and I usually go ahead and touch it. Now the grass I'm not too worried about because I'm not going to be doing anything with the grass, but I am going to be outlining the eggs and putting the detail work on the basket. And this is kind of, I feel like, what makes the image come to life once you start adding these details. And I like to draw these lines so that they are not super heavy. It's a very light sketching kind of touch, as if you were actually sketching these. And I find this a very methodical process. It's actually quite fun. And some people call it watercolor sketching. I call it watercolor sketching because it's creating like a look as if you had sketched it in ink and then gone back and painted. And it adds so much definition just right away. You can rotate your work a little bit if you need to. And I'm going to go ahead and just do the whole basket outline. Depending on the project you're working on, if you want it to look really whimsical, I've done some where I will just make it so that the paint is like way outside the outlines purposely. And it has a fun, whimsical look to it. And I will do a video of that soon. Spring is here where I live, and there's lots of flowers blooming, so I get really inspired by the flowers. And I will probably be taking photographs too of flowers and just recreating whimsical paintings. Super fun. And you want the basket to look a little bit rough. You don't want it to be like perfectly outlined because it's a basket, it's wicker, it's not perfect. And then I'm going to put lines as if the basket had this kind of weaving. Add some other lines for interest. And you can see it really makes a huge difference when you start adding in these details. And yes, you could do this if you're thinking, could I just paint this? You could. But especially as a beginner, it might be, you might find it a little bit difficult to make perfect fine lines. And I don't want you to get frustrated. I feel like it's just so much easier to use the pen, and it's actually quite fun. Okay, I'm pretty happy with the way this turned out. And the last part would be to add the white. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now I'm going to go ahead and use this Sharpie paint pen. I have a rollerball pen also. I found out that that's actually better for really small details. And I like this Sharpie, it's a little bit fatter pen. And so I do usually, again, test it and make sure that it's coming out okay. Prime it a little bit, make sure that it's the right amount of white that you want. And I'm just going to go ahead and add some white details to these eggs. This one's some polka dots. Stripes. You're going to want to make sure that your paint is really dry again when you do this, your base colors. And usually I end up having to go back over it because it the color tends to bleed through a little bit. So I'm going to let this dry, and then I'm going to put another coat on it. Okay, I'm actually using my rollerball pen now, and I'm just kind of going over the areas that I had used with the paint pen. And I've been looking at so many different colors of white pen, or brands of white pen, and I really haven't found a really great one. And I've been watching other artists who use the same technique, and they're kind of saying the same thing. It's kind of hard to find a really great white pen. So if you know of any and you're watching this, please leave me a comment, as I would love to find out where those are. So what I do now is I just kind of figure out, the look I'm trying to get and go over it a few times if need be. And sometimes too, I think maybe you have to shake these pens, make sure they're well mixed. And I feel like that gives it a lot of interest. Okay, so it is done, and the last thing that I like to do is always sign my work. And I always say, sign your work so you can keep track of your progress. You can look back years ago and see how much you've progressed with your painting and how much you've stayed consistent. So I use the Micron 005. It's a very, very fine tip pen, and I am going to just sign my initials very lightly here in the corner. I like to just keep it pretty small, and I just use my initials, and then I like to add the date, the year, so I can always remember that I painted this at that time. Okay, there you go. And if you enjoyed this, please subscribe to my channel here on YouTube. And I encourage you to continue to keep painting. Send me photographs. I have my Facebook group that you are welcome to join. It's totally free. There's more tips and whole group of supportive people in there, women who are painting together. And sometimes I do fun challenges and things within the group. Join my Facebook group, post your work in there. I would love to see it. And I also do a once a month free workshop. So once you join my group, you would be able to get information about those free workshops where we paint together online. I hope you enjoyed this. And again, I would love to see your work. I would love to meet you and get to know you. And here at Kitchen Table Creativity, there's no judgment. There's no perfectionistic anything needed. We are all artists. We are all working towards our own style and just having fun and enjoying our creativity. Okay, so have a great rest of your day or your night, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.